Good morning. My name is Wally Kelly, and I'm the Health Center Chaplain here at the Moorings. I welcome you to Chaplain's Corner this Thursday morning, November 4th, 2021. The Beatitudes, according to Matthew, mark the beginning of Jesus' public teaching ministry. They are the first things that Jesus emphasized as he proclaimed the gospel of the kingdom. Unlike Moses at Mount Sinai, Jesus began his Sermon on the Mount not with commandments, but with promises of God's blessing on attitudes of the heart. He wanted to bring our hearts in tune with his. The Beatitudes describe the foundational character qualities Jesus wanted to be at work in his people. When Jesus spoke to crowds, he diagnosed their needs. He healed them. He fed them. He prayed for them and gave them hope. When he delivered his Sermon on the Mount, known as the Beatitudes, he spoke to a specific group, to the poor. Our culture today sees the poor as those who have little financial resources or material possessions. But in the first Beatitude, Jesus said to the crowd, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Billy Graham once commented that the message of Jesus was not only for the financially poor, the socially poor, or the intellectually poor, but also for those who recognized their spiritual poverty. The truth is, regardless of our cleverness, our achievements, and our gadgets, we are spiritual paupers without God. There are famous and wealthy people who are pitifully poor in spirit. This is the very reason that the gospel must always be proclaimed, because it reveals our human need for forgiveness and points us to Christ. John Piper said that at the end of one of his talks at a university, one student asked a very common question that pops up all the time. The student said, "Isn't Christianity a crutch for people who can't make it on their own?" Piper's answer was very simple. He said yes, period. He said he can't remember how the conversation went from there, but upon further thought on the matter, his return question would be, why is the thought that Christianity is a crutch considered to be a valid criticism of Christianity? People don't usually look at a crutch and say, that's bad, it's just a crutch. People don't, in general, think that crutches are bad things. Why does a crutch become a bad thing when it's Christianity? The answer that most Christians would give is this: if Christianity is a crutch, then it's only good for cripples. But we don't like to see ourselves as cripples. And it's offensive to our self-sufficiency to label Christianity as a crutch. But Jesus said those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. It's from the Gospel of Mark, the 2nd chapter, verse 17. In other words, the only people who will ever come to get what Jesus has to give are sick people, people who know that they are spiritually and morally, and yes, sometimes physically handicapped or crippled. All people believe in something and shape their lives around it. Even agnostics believe very strongly that you ought not believe anything very strongly. We all have a creed that we live by, whether we can articulate it or not. So what is the creed behind the conviction that if Christianity is a crutch, it is undesirable and unworthy of acceptance? I think perhaps the answer is this. The creed behind this criticism of Christianity is the confidence that we are not cripples and that real joy and fulfillment in life are to be found in the pursuit of self-reliance self-confidence, self-determination, and self-esteem. Any Messiah who comes along and proposes to replace self-reliance with childlike God-reliance and self-confidence with submissive God-confidence and self-determination with sovereign grace and self-esteem with magnificent mercy for the unworthy, that Messiah is going to be a threat to the religion of self-admiration. That religion has dominated the world ever since Adam and Eve fell in love with the image of their own independent potential when they saw it reflected back to them in the eye of the serpent. You will not die. You will be like God. Ralph Waldo Emerson, an American poet and philosopher who died about 100 years ago, wrote a famous essay called Selfreliance. It captured the spirit of his age, and I would say the spirit of our age as well. Trust thyself. Every heart vibrates to that iron string. Discontent is the want of self-reliance. Now we see the creed behind the criticism of Christianity as a crutch. The real infirmity of the world, according to Emerson, is lack of self-reliance. And so along comes Christ, not with a cure for the disease, but a crutch. Christ is a stumbling block and an offense to people who preach the gospel of self-reliance, because it takes the disease that we hate most, namely helplessness, and instead of curing it, makes it the doorway to heaven. So what is the biblical solution when a person is paralyzed by a sense of guilt or unworthiness or uselessness? Well, I believe with all my heart that the solution is not self-esteem. Remember when Moses told God he wasn't qualified to be a spokesman for God? What did God say to Moses? He didn't say this. He didn't say, stop putting yourself down. You are somebody. You are eloquent. No, what God said was, stop looking at your own unworthiness and uselessness and look at me. I made the mouth. I will be with you. I will help you. I will teach you what to say. Look to me and live. The biblical answer to the paralysis of low self-esteem is not high self-esteem. It's sovereign grace. God's way of freeing and mobilizing people who see themselves as worms is not to tell them they are beautiful butterflies, but rather to say, I will help you. I am your Redeemer. Go to Egypt now, and I will be with you every step of the way. William Carey, the English Christian missionary, was active in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. With all of his accomplishments, he did not have high self-esteem. Yet he's known as the father of modern missions, and he founded the first degree awarding university in India. He suffered from recurrent fevers all of his life. He limped for years from an injury that he sustained in 1817, yet he was instrumental in translating the entire Bible into 6 languages and parts of it into 29 other languages. Yet the tablet on his grave reads this: William Carey, born August 17th, 1761, died June 9th, 1834. A wretched, poor, and helpless worm. On thy kind arms I fall. So the secret for William Carey was not self-esteem. He was poor in spirit to the very end. A wretched, poor, and helpless worm, he calls himself, knowing very well his sin and failures. His secret was in the last line of his epitaph. On thy kind arms I fall. This was his secret in dying, and this was his secret in living. He cast himself, poor, helpless, and despicable, on the kind arms of God, for he knew the promise of Jesus. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for them belong the merciful and mighty arms of the King of Kings. Being poor in spirit recognizes a sense of powerlessness in ourselves and a sense of spiritual bankruptcy and helplessness before God. It is a sense that if there is to be any life or joy or usefulness, it will have to be all of God and all of grace. Pray with me. God, our Creator, thank you for the gift of Jesus. He walked among us embodying your creative and life-giving word in his body, his life, his words, his deeds, his sufferings, his death, and in his resurrection. When we see him loving the outcast, forgiving the sinner, confronting the hypocrite, and teaching the crowds a new way of life, we see your heart, your compassion, your mercy, your character. So help us, Lord, to be among your disciples who come to you to be taught. Help us, Lord, to be among the poor in spirit, to recognize our spiritual poverty, to rely on your grace and not on ourselves, to live as children of the light. Amen. Have a wonderful day. God bless you.